I get it. There's been a ton of Souls-like games released in the past decade, and there's honestly a certain sense of fatigue towards the term as a whole. To some people, just the mention of a game falling into the genre is enough for them to discount it entirely. And honestly, I get it. I really do. As a fan of any and all games that fall under that umbrella description, it really does feel like it has been used lately as a marketing tool more than anything. There have been some greats released in the past couple years, such as Liza P, but most of the others that claim to be Souls like mostly fall flat in delivering the experience that FromSoft has perfected over the past decade. Wuchang is a game that wasn't really on my radar, if I'm being honest. Like much of the community, I assumed it would be another third person action game with a Souls like tag slapped onto it for the sole purpose of selling more copies. But here's the thing about it, I love to be wrong. And I will go out and say that I've never been so wrong in my life. This game is great, and honestly, let's get into it so we can talk about it. The story of Wuchang Fallen Feathers is one that many of us Soul fans will resonate with from the moment the intro cinematic ends. You play as the titular main character Wuchang moments after you awaken a cave with no memory of who you are or how you ended up in this place. This intro is very reminiscent of Bloodborne in a sense, and honestly, the familiarities continue throughout the base game. After meeting with the shady doctor whose past is clearly connected to the Feathering Plague ripping its way through the fictional nation of Shu, you set off on a journey that has you fighting a wide range of characters and monsters alike. The story isn't one that is particularly new in its tropes and execution, but the story is more than enough to keep anyone interested that is used to these type of games, or games in this genre, so to say. I know I had already made the comparison, but the story very much feels like Bloodborne set in the final years of China's Ming Dynasty. The feathering phenomenon in Wuchang feels very similar, and honestly causes about the same level of deformity as the Beast Plague in Bloodborne, and the stories feel similar in the lengths your character is willing to go to survive the mess they find themselves in. For now, though, I'll curb the idea of taking or talking about their similarities, as, well, it does Wu Chang's story a bit of injustice just to kind of pass it off as just another copy. The story really is a deep dive into how far you're willing to go to remember your past. In the typical FromSoft fashion, most of the stuff you'll learn is through talking to the various NPCs and the items you found scattered throughout the world. There is quite a deep story hidden under the surface, and honestly, I found myself reading most of, if not all, of the various items scattered throughout the game. Like I said earlier, it really doesn't break the standard mold that so many games have done before, but the world around you is so depressingly beautiful that I found myself always in a constant state of awe most of the time as I traveled between the various vistas and interacted with the characters that called it home. And the characters are honestly some of the best parts. Most of, if not all, of the NPCs you encounter have something to ask of you and their own stories to tell if you fulfill their requests. This is one of the first Souls-like games I've played where everything seems to be connected in a way that doesn't feel hopeful or happy, but rather this compounding sense of death and dread that seems to follow you no matter where you go and who you meet. Once again, Bloodborne comparison seems pretty inevitable. There isn't any hope in this world. There's only this death by this feathering disease, and that is pretty much all you have to, all the general populace has to go off of. I will say the story does stutter a bit in the middle, and honestly, I didn't have a problem with it. I know a lot of people are saying it did, but it is a little like you're kind of just jumping from place to place killing bosses, and there really isn't a reason until, it picks up a little bit later. But let's be honest, at the same time, most of us that are playing these type of games, including myself, aren't here for the story. We're here for the world and the gameplay attached to it. Now, from a world perspective, this is one of the prettiest games that I've played in the past few years. I'll go out and say it, even with the various performance issues that I read about. From the enemies, both basic soldiers and the deep cast of bosses, to the environments themselves, the variety on display from the moment you load in till the final boss fight is honestly a sight to see. You have a varied number of locales, from dilapidated villages and castles to vast forests filled to the brim with a host of different colors and twisted enemies that call it home. The world really is the centerpiece of this game besides the gameplay itself, and the developers did a really good job at building sections of the game that not only feel unique in their looks, but are also somehow connected to each other in ways that feel very reminiscent of the original Dark Souls game. There's rarely a loading screen between the areas, and honestly, for the most part, you will have a seamless experience as far as actually seeing these loading screens. Unless you die, and I think that's probably what the developers kind of banked on, because you will be dying a fair bit until you kind of figure out what's going on. But other than that, from a performance perspective, I did get a little bit of stuttering in the beginning, but from a graphical experience, it was mostly enjoyable with my 5060 Ti. Let's be honest with each other. If I have 16 gigs of video memory, I should probably not be getting any trouble with any games, but I still had a fair bit of stuttering in the beginning, like I said, and had to mess with my DLS settings. But I ended up getting about 150 to 200 frames with DLS, so fake frames win sometimes, and other times it was okay. But other than that, I had no issues. Back to the world itself, The depressing nature of the story is further emphasized by the amount of death and destruction you'll see in every section of the map. Even the most quaint and peaceful places like century-old temples and abandoned mine shafts are filled to the brim with corruption and death, and the world really leans into the idea that there's this awful pestilence making its way over this crumbling empire. But enough about the world and the story, let's talk about the gameplay. Now, let's get something out of the way right off the bat. The gameplay loop is in every sense of the word a Souls-like experience. This isn't a game that is going to hold your hand when it comes to the combat aspects, and you will come across more than a few bosses that will challenge you in the ways you expect from this genre. Wuchang Fallen Feathers, though, is a game intent on more than anything, a very simplistic and streamlined approach with a ton of options to tackle enemies as you see fit. There's only 5 different weapon types you have access to, but the thing is most of these weapons all serve a specific purpose that we all know so well. You have the huge battle axes and other heavy-hitting weapons that fill the slow-moving, heavy-hitting category, two-handed swords that bridge the line between heavy and light weapons, and a spear that gives you range and damage over speed, on top of one-handed weapons and dual blades that kind of fill in the niche of quicker attacks and less damage. The system is one that is simple in its execution, but the skill system they have in place isn't one that not only encourages you to try different weapons, but doesn't require you to reset your whole character to do so. You can die to a boss using one weapon, spawn in an altar, switch your entire build in an instant with a couple clicks of buttons, and head back within a minute. This sense of a cohesive game system is one that passes beyond just the weapons too. Everything that you have at your disposal serves a purpose in the combat, and nothing really feels wasted. Your magic system and the skills tied to each weapon are tied to your feathering points, which more or less double as your mana in a sense, and it gives you a ton of options with how you want to approach each fight. The skill tree has a ton of different skills you can choose from for each weapon, and the options you have feel like a more simplified version of Elden Ring's Spirit Ash system. But here's the thing, you got all these weapons and the skills and spells you can use in your own playstyle to boot. How are all the bosses? Well, shit, I'll go out and say it. The boss fights are in every sense of the word the pinnacle of this game. They present just enough challenge to feel like a fair fight, while also giving you some of the most well-designed boss fights that I have played in years. Rarely did I find myself getting bullied by unfair mechanics or aspects that makes the fights feel cheap. More than anything, they present a challenge that feels authentic to the genre, while also feeling like something that a lot of longtime fans and new fans of the genre will enjoy. There's a huge variety of bosses that you'll face, and more often than not, you'll feel a certain sense of awe in each of their arenas, as no two places feel the same. You do get a decent variety of enemies, from standard humans to those twisted by the feathering, and a good healthy mix of grotesque looking monsters and animals, with each one feeling like another challenge standing between you and your destiny. Most of us that are fans of the Souls-like formula of a varied amount of bosses that each have their own moves and weaknesses will be right at home here, and I really do think some of these boss fights at least, will be remembered for years to come just for the sheer scale of epicness and difficulty they present. I mean, all in all, what we have with Wuchang Fallen Feathers is a game that strives to be great. It doesn't break the mold as far as storytelling and very much relies on the formula that we all know and love, but I also think it brings something to the table that a lot of people will enjoy. Its gameplay loop is fun and encourages the player to explore outside their comfort loop. Boss fights are as epic as ever, and honestly, as someone who is already halfway through a second playthrough chasing the other endings, I can't see a world where any FromSoft fan isn't happy with the product we have here. I have been reading quite a few complaints about the game not running smoothly on both the PS5 and PC, but I didn't really have a lot of issues on my own PC, which might just be a testament of the 5060 Ti having so much video RAM that I can kind of just power my way through it. But either way, one can hope that the day one patches aren't on any performance issues, so people can enjoy this game in all its glory. As I'm sure most of you can tell, this is a relatively short review, but I really enjoyed this game. I am currently on my second playthrough already. I had early access to this, and I am really deep into the world and the gameplay and everything else attached to it. It's a really good Souls-like game, and I think most people, once they iron out the performance issues, will probably love it for what it's worth. As always, I hope y'all have a good rest of your day, a good rest of your month, a good rest of your year, and I will see you on the next video.